This video wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for my YouTube, Patreon and Ko-fi members. If you want to support the channel financially, then you can from just £1 per month. As always, the links will be in the pinned comment below. It is the afternoon of the 23rd of June 2012, and all is calm in the Algo Centre Mall, Canada. The mall is home to many retailers, and although experiencing a dip in retail traffic since the 1990s, the mall is still locally a centre for clothing retailers. It was experiencing a gradual decline, but people would still explore the mall. At 2:20 p.m, the final nail in the mall's coffin would be struck, when a sudden and unexpected partial collapse crashed a 12 by 24 metre section of the mall's roof through into the placid retail atmosphere. 2 would lose their lives, dozens more would be injured. But what was the cause? Well, sit back, relax and learn about today's video subject, the 2012 Algo Mall disaster. My name is John and welcome to Plainly Difficult. Now, if you're thinking I've covered this subject before, you'd be wrong. But it seems Canada has a small habit of having retail buildings' rooftop car parks collapsing in on a bunch of shoppers. I'm of course talking about the cave-in foods incident, which I'll link to my video about the subject around about here. Anywho, so let's get into the video proper. The mall and Elliot Lake. So interestingly, our story is kind of linked to a good old friend of the channel. This stuff. Uranium. Bear with me on this. So this is the city of Elliot Lake, Canada, which is around here on a map. The city began in 1955 as a planned community for the uranium mining industry, after a large amount of the material was discovered in the area in the early 1950s. Multiple mines were established, driving the city's economy. The modest city was often described as the uranium capital of the world, being basically the centre of world production. As the city developed and the population peaked each year, plans to build a shopping mall in the city were thrown around in the 1970s. There was potentially money to be made from some hot retail action. As such, a development company, a subsidiary, bizarrely of the Algoma Central Railway, called Algo Realty Holdings Limited, was given the thumbs up by the local authorities in 1978 for a 10 million Canadian dollar at the time shopping mall, built on land consisting of a large rocky slope. This was bought for just under $120,000 in 1979 from the city of Elliot Lake. The shopping mall would be called the Algo Centre, named after the developers, and began construction in 1979, being opened to the public in August 1980. This would offer 165,000 square feet of gross leasable retail floor area and a 12,500 square feet of leasable office space. In addition to this, an 80-room hotel. So what was the design of this brand new cathedral of retail excitement? Let's look at that next. Overall, the building would have an L-shaped footprint and be loosely described as being a steel-framed building. The land the mall occupied was on a slope. This created an interesting multi-level setup, the higher elevation towards the west, sloping down to a lower elevation in the east. It had 3 levels. The upper level, second floor, had rooftop parking above it. It was placed on the west side of the plot of land, with the first floor running the majority of the mall, followed by a basement at the lowest section on the east end of the plot. Rising above the structure by 4 stories was the Algo Inn. This was in total a 6-story high building. The building consisted of steel beams and columns with pre-stressed, precast hollow core concrete slabs that rested on the steel beams that worked as the floors on the roof of the parking deck. Now, the hollow core offered up some good old construction cost savings, but it was much more susceptible to water damage than a solid concrete beam. To combat the water issues, the building had an overall slope to the steel structure in order to help with water runoff. But this is not enough. A proper waterproofing system for the roof was really needed. Enter the Harry S. Peterson waterproofing system. This was a system sold to the mall's developers by, unsurprisingly, the company called Harry S. Peterson Co. The system called for insulation on the underside of the hollow concrete slabs. This allowed for a waterproofing concrete topping brushed on top of the hollow core slabs, which was an additional height of 3 to 4 inches thick. In order to allow for expansion and contraction of the roof structure and for movement of vehicles to not destroy the waterproofing cover, crack control joints were installed. These were V-shaped grooves installed in set intervals along the roof. They were made similar to the control joints that you see on concrete roadways and pavements. In addition to this, at the building's expansion joints and butt ends of the hollow slabs, a sealant was placed over the gap with a secondary piece of strip membrane added underneath. Now, what's worth noting here is that this system was never installed on any other structure before nor after the Algo Mall, and it worked just as well as you could think. The mall opened in August 1980, and even before it welcomed its first guests, the building racked up multiple complaints from retailers of leaks and service issues caused by water incursion. The Harry S. Peterson Company provided a 5-year warranty with its waterproofing system. This included repairs due to defects, as well as scheduled inspections to preemptively deal with any failure points. It was expected that some cracks would appear on the roof material due to the building settling. However, the warranty issues far exceeded the company's expectations. The surface was meant to be resistant to vehicular traffic and snowplow activities as well. This was due to it being built in Canada after all. Leaks plagued the structure, and with the lack of any real fix, one of the tenants, Walco, retained an engineer who suggested installing a waterproof membrane over most of the affected areas. However, the Harry S. Peterson Company assured that they had located the failure point and it would be repaired. In 1982, every joint was recaulked, but the leaks continued to mount up. Complaints continued to rack up, and both the Harry S. Peterson Company and Algo Co. refused to really accept that the roof was just trash and needed completely redoing. But as the issues mounted up and the years dragged on, times were going to get tough for the community of Elliot Lake, when in 1990 the uranium mines closed down. This translated to financial issues for the Algo Mall as the economy began to contract. The mall's owners, still holding a leaky, increasingly financially draining building, wrote off $5 million off the building's value, even though it was nearly fully occupied. But again, things would only get worse as the 90s crawled along. A survey undertaken in 1994 would show not very good results. It was deemed that it needed a new roof covering, but the installed hollow core slabs weren't strong enough to take another covering over it. Looking to get rid of the money sink, the building would be sold off to Elliot Lake Retail Living in 1999. Not much was made of improving the roof, instead the company investing money in other pursuits. In 2005, the building was sold yet again to Eastwood Mall Incorporated, Toronto. And yet again, the building leaked and the new owners didn't fix the issues. Minor spot repairs were undertaken, but retailers were increasingly looking for alternate places to set up shop, as a multitude of buckets scattered around the building to collect water put off potential shoppers. The dumpster fire of the building continued into the 2010s, with issues with the city library situated in the mall. In May 2011, the owner of a restaurant called Hungry Jack's discovered a piece of concrete protruding through the ceiling. They complained, but not much else was done. But what is a bit of concrete between friends, eh? That and the free water ingress were only minor things that would never amount to anything deadly. Right? Right? The disaster. So we are finally here. It is Saturday the 23rd of June 2012, and the Algo Mall, officially known now as the Eastwood Mall since its 2005 purchase, is having just another weekend in the Canadian summer. Shoppers push around their carts as employees work the usual Saturday shift in the dated mall. Cars drive around on the parking area on the roof. At 2:20 p.m, the calm is suddenly interrupted by a 12 by 24 metre or 39 feet by 79 feet section of the roof crashed down into the retail space below, shooting out debris amongst 2 floors. Multiple CCTV cameras around the mall captured different angles of the collapse. Around the same time, many calls were made to 911 requesting emergency response for the collapse. By 2:29 p.m, the Elliot Lake Fire Department arrived on scene and began emergency assistance by shutting off the utilities to the building. It wasn't known, at least initially, how many people, if any, had been trapped under the rubble. The Toronto-based Heavy Urban Search and Rescue Department was called in to assist. They arrived at 4:25 in the morning the next day and began the careful removal of debris. You see, the way the large concrete panel had collapsed, it had encased an escalator area, which meant that search and rescue would be slow and arduous. So much so that even in the face of signs of life amongst the wreckage, pile search and rescue had to be suspended when on Monday morning, aka June the 25th, fears of further collapse required responders to pull out. Eventually, after 19 hours of suspension, rescue works would resume, but sadly on Wednesday, 2 bodies would be pulled from the collapsed section of the mall. The 2 victims were a kiosk worker and their customer. It was thought that the customer had just bought a lottery ticket from the kiosk worker when the collapse occurred. Tragically, one of the victims was thought to have survived for up to 39 hours after the collapse. They may have been saved if it wasn't for the 19-hour pause in the rescue works. In addition to the dead, 22 further people would be injured, to varying degrees. Once the human cost was settled, the picking over of rubble of the Algo Mall shifted to investigation, and the search of what on earth happened to cause such a sudden disaster began. The investigation. So almost as soon as the site was cleared of the dead, investigators descended upon the Algo Mall, delving into its history, design and maintenance. And it wouldn't take long before the leaky history would come to light. You see, the leaking structure would not just be an annoyance in that retailers' stock getting wet and buckets being strewn around the building, but moisture was working its way into the structure itself, most importantly the steelwork and its welds. An engineering firm based in Ontario would be contracted by the Ontario Provincial Police for a forensic study of the structure. They would assist the official inquiry into the collapse. The collapse's beginning point was fairly easy to establish, as the CCTV cameras provided visual evidence of the collapse's starting point on the rooftop parking deck area. Investigators found that a lot of structural issues had plagued the building, and most had originated from its original planning stage, where cost-cutting was the name of the game. The hollow core slabs were cheaper, but weaker than a fully reinforced cast concrete system. As such, weight had to be reduced across the structure. This included using a cheaper and lighter waterproofing system, the terrible Harry S. Peterson Co. system. It was found that the leaks had allowed the steel structure and its welds to weaken to the point of failure. Now, because the roof was a car park, road salts had been used to help with ice removal, which had accelerated the corrosion within the steel structure. Another interesting quirk of the building was that the car park had become somewhat of a rat run, where cars used the structure to avoid a set of traffic lights, increasing the strain of vehicular traffic on the building far beyond its intended loads. The way the building was managed resulted in years of neglect, which ultimately led to its demise, even up to the final years where owners tried to cover up structural issues by pushing an engineer into changing his 2012 inspection report in order to obtain financing. But a collapse would be the end of them all. In January 2013, demolition of the Algo Centre Mall began. The engineer would be indicted for changing their 2012 report. However, Justice Edward E. Guerrero of the Ontario Superior Court found that there was not enough evidence to find them guilty beyond reasonable doubt. They would be the only person criminally charged related to the disaster. So that's my video on the Algo Mall collapse. There's going to be a 3 on my scale, and this is what I've got for my root cause analysis card. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. This is a Plain Default production. All videos on the channel are Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike licensed. Plain Default videos produced by me, John, in the currently very cold corner of Southern London, UK. And all that's left to say is thank you very much for watching, and Mr. Music, can you play us out, please?
Mm.